So I'm so happy to see so many of you here today. It's quite an honor to get to learn with you and share what my true passion is with you, which is helping people learn how to draw and paint realistically. Because despite what some of us might believe, like there's no talent fairy that comes and bops us on the head and then we can draw and paint realistically. But it is a learned skill that anybody can learn that has access to good knowledge and a competent instructor. And so today, you have me as your Atelier trained artist guiding you, and buckle in everybody because it's getting real today. We're going to go through how do we actually create a painting from beginning to end. I'm going to show you all the stages of a painting that you do when you're painting in an Atelier method. And so we're really getting into it today. So welcome. I'm so happy that you're all here. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how to paint. All right, and this is like a can of worms, right? Like how to paint. There's many different approaches to paint, but we're going to be talking specifically how do we paint realistically using an Atelier method. All right, the Atelier method we'll talk about a little bit more. Let me know in the chat if you've heard the term Atelier before or if it's your first time hearing that term. You know, sometimes that word can feel a little intimidating, but atelier is just the French word for studio. And it's just a way to describe the type of training that has been inherited from generation to generation of artists, kind of the collected body of knowledge in art. Okay, so as we get going here today, I just want to make sure to welcome all of you, and I encourage everybody to make this a moment of focus. Atelier training is not for the faint of heart. It's a no joke training, right? And so if you're really going to learn with us today, you need to commit your focus to this lesson and, you know, make sure to turn off your phone. For me, I really like learning with a cup of coffee to cuddle or, you know, a tea or something. So whatever helps you being your best learning mindset, take a moment and just kind of set yourself up, you know, to take in a lot of information because we have so much to cover today. All right. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box there. I will answer some questions as I'm going through the slides, but I promise that I will answer every question that you have at the end. You know, sometimes I'll ignore a question when it first pops up because it'll be covered in a later slide. And sometimes it's just a little bit of a tangent and I'll answer it at the end. But if for any reason you did not get your question answered, please make sure to just post it again at the end and I will answer everybody's questions. Okay. So if you find these trainings useful, especially, you know, some of you, this is your second, third training this week with me, please share with your friends. If there are other people out there in the world that want to learn how to draw and paint realistically, I want to share this knowledge with them. And so please, if you have friends, neighbors, acquaintances that you feel could benefit from learning about Atelier training, please make sure to share these free classes with them. Okay, so hello everybody. I see a lot of returning students here, but a lot of new faces as well. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Mandy Tice, and I am an Atelier trained artist and a licensed art teacher. And I love painting realistically. It has always been my dream to be able to paint realistically. And when I found Atelier training, I realized that, oh, anybody can learn how to do this if you just really work hard and study hard under somebody who knows what they're doing. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Atelier training. And obviously, we're going to be talking a whole lot about the process of painting today. Okay, so I always like to start off the classes with a few questions. So, you know, with Atelier training, it is realistic drawing and painting training. So maybe this sounds like you go to a museum and you see realistic paintings there and you're like, oh, I really wish I could do that, but I don't know how to get from where I am right now to what I see on the museum walls. So let me know in the chat, is that something that you've experienced? Or maybe, and this is really common, and this is my favorite picture ever, because this is totally how I felt when I was trying to teach myself how to paint. You know, I was reading books, I was looking online for anything I could, but I would often start a painting and then get partway through and it wasn't where I wanted it to be. It wasn't matching my vision that I had in my head, but I didn't know how to get it better. I knew it wasn't what I wanted, but I had no idea how to go forward. So if you've ever been in the middle of a painting and you had this like clear idea in your head of what you wanted it to be, but you just got stuck and you didn't know what to do next, like, let me know. Has that happened to you? It's definitely, something that I struggled with a lot before I found Atelier training is, what do I do? I don't understand. There's something I'm missing, and I didn't know what it was until I found Atelier training. Yeah, Cassie, for sure. Me too. Okay, so the first thing I really want to talk about, this whole workshop today is on how to paint, right? And if you really want to know how to paint realistically, you need to understand the significance of learning from the people that came before you. So, we're used to seeing musicians, for example, they will, play other people's music often for many years before they start composing their own pictures, right? And what they're doing is, they're learning. Musicians don't compose pictures; they compose music. Apologies. I'm just so focused on painting and art. So, what they're doing is that they're learning these techniques by, following in the footsteps of those other musicians. And painters can do that too. And this idea of painting master copies and learning from the old masters kind of fell out of favor for the last 100 years. And I find that I really have to make a case for my students now. Like, if you really want to learn efficiently, the best thing that you can do is to start your painting journey by making master copies. Now, that being said, there are good ways to approach master copies and there are less effective ways to approach master copies. So it's not enough just to be like, oh, I'm going to copy this painting. You also need to have a good process and good techniques. And we're going to talk about that today. Cassie, that's a good point. Musicians do paint pictures and sound. That's what I meant, really. Thank you for letting me save face. Okay, and reiterating again, you need a painting process. So you need to have an idea of what you want to paint and how you're going to learn. If you're new to painting, master copies are the best way to do that. And then once you're trying to copy a master copy, you need to have a process so that you're actually learning efficiently and getting the most out of your investment in copying that painting. Because what we're trying to learn how to do is to see a subject the way another artist did. And when you do a master copy, that's what you're doing, is you're learning, when this artist paints apples, they choose these colors and they, split the light and shadow in this way for a reason. So you're kind of putting yourself into the old master's shoes and you're starting to adopt their eyes, during the time that you're doing their master copy. But it's not going to help you if you don't have a clear process for making a master copy well. And I'm going to teach you the whole process today. So like I said, buckle up because this is an intensive session. This is like, we're on class number 3 of the 5-day series and we're ready to really get into it. Okay. And then also at the end, if you are enjoying what you're learning today, and if you are ready to like take your art to the next level, if you really want to pursue this seriously, if you're serious about learning how to paint, no matter what your skill level is right now, I'm going to talk at the end about how our Atelier Bootcamp might be just the thing that you are looking for. So just as a reminder, this free, 5 workshop series is a celebration of this new class that we have. And, my students have been asking me for years and years and years, please, Mandy, can we have like a regular online class? And so here it is. It's here for you. And I'll talk about that at the end. Okay, so why is oil painting so confusing, right? And we've touched on this a little bit in our other workshops, but there's a lot of reasons it's confusing. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that technical knowledge in how to draw and paint has largely been lost over the last 100 years, because as it fell out of favor, for the last 100 years, art really favored the idea over the execution, right? And so a lot of these technical skills were kind of set aside. And once they were set aside for 1 generation and 2 generations, all of a sudden it was really hard to find them again if you did want them. And, I've been there. I loved being in museums, as a kid and growing up. And I always loved these paintings and just yearned so much to be able to paint this way. I wanted it so bad. And I just didn't know how to get from where I was to this technical capacity that I saw that humans were capable of doing when I went to museums. And so I like to show my before and after Atelier training a lot with students. So this is a painting I made of some donuts before my Atelier training. And at the time, this is one of like the best paintings I had ever made. Like it was the closest I had ever come to achieving trying to paint realistically. And, you know, but it still wasn't quite there. Like I knew I was still missing something, but this was like the closest I could come with like being self-taught and, you know, trying to learn from books and trying to learn online and, you know, getting good information, bad information. Like that's the problem with online learning, right? Is that if you're piecemealing a bunch of information from a bunch of different sources, the quality varies greatly. And if you want to learn Atelier knowledge, you need to train with an Atelier person. And sometimes it's difficult to tell who has the knowledge and who doesn't, especially if you're at the beginning of your art journey. But I did find an Atelier. I actually, I was teaching in Montana at the time. I quit my job. I moved across the country to train full-time in Seattle, Washington. I see some Seattle folks here in the chat. And I trained full-time in Atelier for 4 years in Seattle and an additional year or two in other ateliers across the country. And that's when I really learned how to draw and paint from someone that had Atelier training that could actually teach me this. So, you know, the Atelier training is really key. And then my work changed, right? So look at the dimensionality in this painting, like how round, how real it feels. And let's just go back to that other one, you know, how flat this looks like in comparison, how kind of cartoony, you know. So if you've ever really struggled with your painting looking cartoony or like you're trying to make it real, but it's off, you know, and you know it's off, but you don't know how to get it to where you want to go. You know, Atelier training can take you here, right? It's certainly possible. And I emphasize this so much. Anybody, I don't care what your experience is, like, you know, I have students that are doctors and I have students that are dentists and I have students that are like business people and I have students that are ceramicists or, you know, sculptors. It doesn't matter what your background is. If you want to draw and paint realistically, you can do so if you study with an Atelier trained person and you put in the hours to learn the skill. So it's accessible to anybody. Okay, so I want to start by talking about the master copies because if you go to an atelier, the first painting project that you are most likely to do is a master copy. And we touched a little bit at the beginning of this workshop about why that's true. You can learn super efficiently. You get an idea of you know, how another artist was thinking, how another artist was solving color problems, etc. So doing master copies is a really efficient way to learn how to draw and paint well. However, if you just, you know, start with a master copy and, you know, kind of don't have a process for it, you're not going to learn that much from it. Hopefully you'll learn something from it, but you have to be methodical and have an intention and a specific approach in your mind in order to get the most that you can out of the master copy. So here we go. We're going to go through an entire painting process now with the assumption that we're working with a master copy. Okay, so this is, we're going to go through every single step of this process. And I'm giving you kind of the big overview today, but in the Atelier Painting Bootcamp that I'm going to talk about at the end, there is like an hour-long video on each of these steps, and you would be getting critiqued on each of these steps along the way to make sure that you're on track and staying on the right track. But I definitely want to make sure that I give you a big overview today about what each of these steps are, because if you have a process for painting, you will have more success in your painting. And if you have a process for painting and something starts to go awry, you have a step that you can go back to and then move forward again. So, you know, having a clear process that's consistent for you is huge. I cannot emphasize enough that having systems for painting are super important. It's not just about, you know, learning the skills. It's about making it as easy for yourself as possible to spend your mental energy on the things that are really hard and spending the least amount of mental energy on logistics of painting. And that's what systems do, is they make the logistics automatic for you so that the only thing you have to think about are the hard things, that you don't get distracted by, oh, where's that paint on my palette again? Or, oh, I ran out of paint, or, oh, what brush do I need? By creating systems for yourself, you are creating a support system that's going to allow you to paint at a higher level. Okay, so let's talk about this process. We're going to go through every stage from beginning to end of how we would create a master copy using an Atelier method. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is transfer the drawing. Now, this can be somewhat controversial in ateliers. Some ateliers would never let you trace and transfer. They'll want you to do the full drawing and then put it over. However, because the people that are coming to me are learning specifically how to paint, it's not a drawing class, it's a painting class. And so by taking this drawing element, putting it to the side and giving them a strong drawing to start with without having to teach the drawing part, we can get students directly into the color work and the painting skills and the paint handling skills and things like that. So I want to be full disclosure here, transferring your painting instead of drawing it by eyeballing it can be controversial depending on which atelier you're going to. I choose, because I'm trying to make this course focused entirely on painting, I choose the transfer method so that the most amount of time in instruction is focused on the painting, not the drawing. And it's not that drawing isn't important, it's that I found that most people really, really want to paint. And I find that if I teach them, especially like a master copy, and teach them enough about painting, what they discover at the end is, oh, okay, I need to shore up my drawing a little bit. And then they're open in their heads and in their hearts to learn drawing, in a way that they necessarily might not be when they're like, oh, I just really want to paint, right? So this gives us an opportunity to learn painting, have a successful project with painting, but also understand what's the difference between drawing and painting. And if I really want to continue moving forward with my art, what's my next step after this? Okay, so the way we do a transfer is just tracing paper. So you're tracing the most important lines, then you're scribbling on the back of the tracing paper, and then you're transferring it to canvas. Now, if you just keep the graphite on the canvas, it's not going to work, because in our next step, we're going to be doing something called a wipeout, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you just have the pencil there, you're going to lose all the graphite in the next step. So what I have students do is use a Sharpie. Now, traditionally, you would use a kind of a waterproof ink. If you look at the old master paintings in museums, you'll often see some of the under drawings coming through that were done in ink. However, there's so much variation in the way ink is produced today. And I have found through experience teaching atelier skills over the last decade that it's very, very aggravating if you are drawing or you're working on your wipeout and the ink is one of the brands that happens to wipe off. And I have found that Sharpie is always there consistently. And so I know it'll work for you. And that's why I choose to tell my students Sharpie. But you want a thin Sharpie. If you get like a really fat Sharpie, then all of a sudden your lines are so wide and you don't know, oh, did I mean that this is the left side of the line or the right side of the line? So you want to keep your lines really thin as much as possible. Okay, so are there any questions so far about this first stage, about transferring our drawing? So we start with our master copy, we put a piece of tracing paper on top, we trace the most significant lines. You don't have to trace all the lines, just the most significant places. And usually in a painting, the most significant places are where a light area is meeting a dark area, because paintings don't actually have lines. Like if you were to paint my portrait, you're not going to draw a line around my nose and a line around my mouth. What happens is that there's shadow and light, right? So like on my neck here, the shadow side and the light side, and there's a line that we would call a line, but it's not really a line. It's just an area of dark meeting an area of light. And so when we're doing a transfer, what we're doing is finding those areas where light meets dark, and we're using a line to represent that. Okay, so what our next stage is, all right, so we have our transfer, we transfer to canvas. Now in the painting boot camp, all of the very specific art supplies I have linked in there so that you can get exactly what I'm using in the instructional videos, exactly what I'm using in the supplemental slide lessons. So there's also a slide lesson on each phase of this. There's a whole slide lesson just on the transfer, just, so that you can have that as a reference while you're going through the instruction. Okay, so I'm seeing something from Elena about A4 and A3. Oh, so our dear friends in Europe use different standard sizes than we have in the States. So you can use something that's approximately a similar size. It doesn't have to be exact. And what will happen is when you're doing the tracing, as long as you trace the outside parameter when you put it on your canvas, it doesn't matter if there's extra canvas around it, right? Just as long as you make sure you know where the border of your master copy is. So if I were to trace this and transfer it to canvas, part of the tracing is making sure that I'm tracing around that outside square shape so that I know exactly where the boundaries of my master copy are going to be. So that's a great question, Elena. Okay, so we have the transfer. So when I'm talking to you about logistics, like, this seems really obvious, right? But if someone doesn't teach you this and you're just like, okay, I'm going to start a master copy, you can like start spinning your wheels for a long time, just figuring out what kind of canvas you want to buy. How are you going to transfer it? What kind of ink are you going to use to transfer it? What lines do I transfer and what lines do I not transfer? And all these questions are covered in depth when you are training with somebody in an Atelier method. So obviously we only have an hour today and I'm trying to get through the whole painting process with you. But in the boot camp, I'm telling you, there's an hour-long instruction just on this stage of the drawing, because there's so much that if you know up front, it will save you so much heartache when you're actually executing. The more precision you have in what your focus is and what you're trying to do, the less frustration you have when you're trying to learn how to paint. Okay, and Julie's asking, is there a drawing class if you want to start with drawing? Yes, I mentioned this yesterday in the boot camp. I'll put it in the chat, but I have a free drawing class on bark plates. And if you type in bark plates into YouTube, it's from when I used to work with an organization called the Da Vinci Initiative, and it's on their YouTube channel. But I have like 30 hours worth of instruction on how to do a bark plate, which is usually the first drawing project that you would do in an atelier. So if you're interested in starting with drawing, I encourage you to do that. We also have 3 different worksheet bundles in the School of Atelier Art store. And, one of them's on color theory, but the other 2 are drawing based bundles. So if you're interested in shoring up your drawing skills, I encourage you to check those out. Okay, so we have the transfer. Oh, thanks, Emily. Emily's saying that she worked with those videos with high school students. Thank you. I try to be like very thorough and break things down into like really small pieces so that it's like very clear what do you need to do next. And whether I'm teaching drawing or like in the painting boot camp that we're launching, it's very thorough, specific instruction, taking one small bite at a time. Okay, so we have our transfer in theory, right? So we've made a lot of decisions on what our canvas is, what our master copy is, how we're transferring it, how we're getting it transferred. And our next stage is what's called a wipeout. And this is a form of underpainting. Now, I want to be very clear. There's lots of ways to do an underpainting. I teach one very specific way to do an underpainting. Most of what I'm teaching and what I choose to teach and the methods out of many methods that there are, the reason I choose the ones that I do is I'm looking for the ones that require the least amount of materials, that are most accessible, especially for art teachers to teach in the classroom, because I work with a ton of art teachers all over the country, and we're working to save these skills and techniques from extinction by helping art teachers learn them. So, classroom efficiency and the ability to teach this technique to lots of students is a consideration, and also safety, because there's a lot of misinformation about what studio safety, and I try as hard as possible to not have chemicals and mineral spirits and additives in the paint as much as possible, just to make sure that we are keeping our studio and being healthy, while we're painting. So that's why I'm choosing this wipeout method, because it uses an earth-based pigment. So when you use a burnt umber or a burnt sienna for your underpainting. It's basically dirt. It's dirt that's mixed with oil and with vegetable oil, right? And because with a wipeout, sometimes you'll get paint on your on your hands. It's really important to me that when I'm teaching it with an earth-based pigment, because vegetable oil plus dirt is not as big of a concern of having it on your hands as some of the other pigments that are out there. So please know that everything is done through 10 years of teaching experience of teaching this to other people, teaching in classroom settings, etc., to give you efficiency and also clarity, and keeping in mind, being conscientious about health decisions as well. Okay, so the way a wipeout works is that you're basically spreading an earth pigment of some kind on your panel, and you're covering the whole thing, and you're wiping back just enough. If you look closely, you can still see a few of those Sharpie lines sticking through, right? So you want to cover the whole thing with an even layer and pull back just enough that you can just barely see your lines. And once you do that, you can start taking a clean t-shirt cloth or cotton cloth and wiping out the areas that are going to be light. Now, the point of this is to help you set the values in your painting. So you have really light areas and really dark areas, and we want as much as possible to kind of key those values and get those values in line, and so that they make sense with each other. So we want the lightest part of our painting to be the lightest part of our wipeout, and the darkest part of our painting to be the darkest part of our wipeout. Okay, so you can see this wipeout in progress here, right? So you're pulling out the lightest areas. And you know what's fun about these? Often I'll have students that will start their wipeout again because they're so pleased and happy with how good their wipeout looks that they can't stand to paint on top of it in the next steps. So especially if it's your first wipeout, I strongly encourage you to just do another one. The wipeout itself doesn't take that long, maybe an hour or two, right? And if you're really attached to it, like, let yourself have that victory, like let yourself just have that as its own painting and start another painting with a wipeout that you won't be afraid to paint over. Sometimes I just have to really nudge students to do 2 wipeouts because like they are heartbroken about the idea of painting over it. And it's like getting in their way of being able to try that next stage and to learn that next stage. So, a lot of people love their wipeouts. Embrace it. That's great. Just do another one if you're really attached to it. But don't let your love of your wipeout keep you from painting, going on to the next stage, because there's so much more joy in what you're about to learn, when you go through the next stage. Yes, Julie is saying, yeah, as a teacher, thank you. We are limited on supplies we can use. Yes, I'm well aware. I taught in public schools and Title I schools. I've also, I taught in rural schools in Montana. I also more recently taught in Newark, New Jersey, in a very urban school setting. And I definitely recognize the issues with supplies and costs and logistics and all of the things. So I try really hard to make sure that everything that I teach you is something that you can take and put it into a classroom. Okay, so once you have your wipeout, then you can start adding the color on top. So typically you want your wipeout to dry completely, because if you start putting color on top, it's going to pull up that color underneath and it's going to make your colors super muddy. We don't want that. So you have to be a little bit patient with yourself and give it at least a day or so to dry. Now, another advantage of using an earth pigment as your wipeout color is that earth pigments tend to dry more quickly than, say, cadmiums or titanium white, or other pigments dry much slower than earth pigments. So by using an earth pigment, you're getting a quick dry and you'll be ready to paint the next day. So that's a great question, Elena. Yeah. So you need to give it a day, but I encourage students, if they're feeling really antsy, like, do another wipeout. Like, there's so much joy in a wipeout, and there's so much to learn, because you really have to think carefully about your values. And I spend a lot of time talking about this in the painting bootcamp video, because again, there's a whole hour-long video just on the wipeout, and a critique video where you can see me critiquing students' wipeouts and what they did wrong and what needs to be adjusted. But it's really sometimes hard to wait for it to dry because you're just so excited because it looks so good and you're ready to go on to the next stage. So doing a second wipeout is always a good idea, because then, especially if you make a big mistake when you go to color, you have another painting that you can go to having learned your lesson and you're ready to go again. Oh, Meryl Ann's saying that she has her students take a photo of the underpainting and then they're more willing to paint over it. Yes. So this is the voice of experienced teachers. So for those of you who are teaching this to others, you know how attached students get, whether they're adult students, young students, people get really attached to the underpainting. So that's a great choice, taking a picture so that you can remember it fondly and then carry on with your painting. Okay, so when we're adding the color in a very specific way. And again, there are many Atelier methods. I do not claim that this is the one true Atelier method and nobody else knows what they're doing or anything else. But I have found that this method has helped my students learn color and form in an efficient way. And I found that they've had more success with this method than the other methods I've tried to teach them. And so I've really honed in on this method and really developed a system for teaching tiling that's been quite effective for my students. So this is the method that you would be learning in the boot camp. This is the method that I encourage you to start learning. And the idea is that instead of looking at the whole pair and trying to paint the whole pair, all at once, like, oh, here's some greeny yellow, and then all of a sudden you have a mess, right? Is to work just one little strip at a time. So you can see on this pair here, there's like a little arrow, right? We're just working one little strip at a time. And instead of trying to think about the color of the whole pair at the same time and trying to paint it all at once, we're really focused on, okay, in this little tile, what is the color? And how does the color change when I move just a little bit next to it? And how does the color change a little bit next to that? So if you look at this example here, you can see in the dark area of the pear, it's kind of like a dark reddy brown color. And then it transitions from a dark reddy brown color to a little bit of a reddy green, and then a little bit more green, and then kind of a reddy yellow green, and then more into a yellow. And then at the very far edge where the arrow is pointing, it actually starts to get a little bit darker because the pear is turning away from the light, even on that far edge. And by thinking about your color this way, you're seeing what's called the movement of color. And I think this is one of the more difficult things to teach students when they're learning how to paint in an Atelier way, is that, this pear is a very rounded form. And even though overall, if you had to say, what color is it? You might say green. It's not actually green. Like, that's a symbol. If we average it all together, sure, maybe green is, but the pear is actually red and yellow and green. It has a lot more color in there. And if you don't take the time to slow down and ask yourself, okay, what is this little piece and how does it relate to the piece next to it, you're missing a huge amount of nuance in the form. Okay, so just to review the painting part here, so we have our wipeout, and once we have the wipeout, we're going to start going across the form with tiling, right? So that's what's happening. And I switched to this pear here just to make it like really, really obvious in the color. I just wanted it to be like smack you in the face, like this is how tiling works. Now, in order for tiling to be effective, you have to not only be able to see the color, but you have to be able to describe the color accurately in order to mix the color. And that's actually the topic of our class on Sunday. I'm giving a whole class just on how to mix any color that you want. And you need that information in order to mix each one of these tiles. And of course, in the Atelier Painting Bootcamp, I cover this super, super in depth. There's a ton of videos on it and a lot of critiques of the students in the bootcamp that you can follow along and kind of see where, oh, people messed up here, they got it better here. And of course, in the bootcamp as well, I'm actually critiquing people twice a week, right? So people come, they show up for critiques, and we talk about whatever you got done, in those last few days to help keep everybody on track. Because trying to learn Atelier training on your own, kind of back at the beginning of the lesson here when I showed you those donuts. Like, that was me trying to learn on my own. And it's not that I wasn't getting anywhere, but I wasn't getting anywhere fast, and I wasn't getting anywhere efficiently. And atelier training is just this efficient way. But what makes atelier training so good is that you have this feedback from an atelier trained artist. The reason atelier training kind of survived in the studio system is that, atelier trained people, they would take on a certain number of apprentices, and then they would have that one-on-one time with them and help guide them and teach them, what to do. Because I can tell you all day long, okay, this is tiling, go off and do it, right? And you'll have varying degrees of success. But if you go off and do it and bring it back to me, I can be like, okay, this tile was good because of this reason. You missed this tile because you were thinking of this instead of this, right? So it's just a matter of efficiency. So training with an atelier trained person is like, if you're serious about your art and you're serious about learning how to draw and paint realistically, there's no substitute for it. You need to train with an atelier trained person. Okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I wanted to tell you, again, this workshop, this whole painting process, how to paint, it's all part of our week-long series that we're doing to celebrate the launch of our Atelier Painting Bootcamp. And I've mentioned a little bit about it already, but I just want to give you a clear understanding of what it is and how it can help you if you're looking to learn how to draw and paint realistically. Okay, so the whole point is that you can spin your wheels trying to figure it out on your own, or you can have a process. So what did we do today? We learned a drawing process. So we started with the drawing, we transferred it, we did a wipeout, we did our first pass, and then once you finish up your first pass, then you can, basically the second pass is the same thing with smaller tiles, right? So it gives it a higher level of finish. So you have this process that you can follow. Like, let's say something goes terribly wrong with your wipeout. What do? Go back one step, transfer your drawing again, and try again. Oh, what happens if your first pass just goes totally wacko? You meant to make a green pear, but it turned out to be orange instead. Okay, what step do you go back to? You go back to the wipeout, right? So when you have a process, you don't get stuck. You know what you need to do to go forward, and you know if you messed up and if you need to take a step back. Okay, so like, how do you do this? How do you learn? Like, if you really want to paint realistically, here's your choices. So your first choice is continue doing what you're doing, take the free workshops as you find them. I try to be really generous with teaching, but obviously when I have hundreds and hundreds of people signing up for these webinars, I'm not going to be able to critique each one of you, right? And you really need that dedicated time and attention to truly learn atelier training. So option one is like, do your best, piecemeal it together, follow who you can. Okay, great. Like, you'll get somewhere that way. Option number two is to train with an atelier trained person, and those hours of training are being efficient in helping you get further faster. So those are the choices. And I think, obviously, I believe in atelier training. I gave up my career, moved across the country, waitress through the nights to get atelier training myself. So I know what the value is of really learning it from somebody who knows. So, what are you going to get in the boot camp? You're going to figure out systems. So, figure out how to set your studio up the right way. Figure out where the paint goes on your palette. Here's a hint. It doesn't go in the middle of your palette. That's for mixing, okay? There's an upside up and an upside down of your palette. And if you're holding it upside down, it's going to be much more miserable for you to paint than if you hold it upside up. There's left-handed and right-handed palettes. Are you using a left-handed palette but you're right-handed? So, there's all these little things that can trip you up just in the setup before you even put paint to canvas. So why torture yourself? Like, there's efficiencies that you can learn and know, and having an atelier trained person guiding you, being like, oh, honey, your palette's upside down, right? It can be a huge help. So master your materials. So you can mush around paint all you want, but if you have someone that's like, okay, that's way too much paint on your brush. Oh, that's not enough paint on your brush. Or these 3 tiles were really great, but do you see this 4th tile? Like, you really messed that one up, and here's how it went wrong. You're learning mastery from a master, from somebody who has really intensive training. They're not going to let you do dumb things. Discover good painting techniques. So there's a lot of information out there in the world. Like obviously I have some classes out on YouTube that I think are really great, but I also get suggested classes all the time on YouTube where I'm like, don't do that, that's bad, right? Because Atelier skills fell out of favor for basically a century. Everybody's trying to figure it out on their own. And some people have found the ateliers and tapped into that. And some people are teaching what they've managed to piece together on their own. But some of the information is not good and is actually going to derail you and not help you get where you're going. And you have to know enough to know who can help you and who cannot help you. And there's a lot of great information online too. But are you advanced enough in your knowledge right now? Are you Atelier trained enough right now to be able to see the difference between the two? Sometimes it takes, like, you don't know what you don't know until you learn it, right? So it's definitely something to be aware of. And stop getting stuck. You don't have to be the kitty in the tree. Like, you can have someone that's critiquing you twice a week where you're like, Mandy, I'm stuck. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? And get unstuck, right? You can get unstuck twice a week, no matter where you are in your painting process. Okay, and you can learn along with me and other Atelier trained artists that work with me in the boot camp to make sure that you're on the right track, right? So this critiques, like I said, I spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars, moved across the country, left my career to get this training. And this boot camp is an opportunity for you to be able to learn at your home with Atelier trained artists that know what they're doing. So what is the investment? So the boot camp is only $4.99 a month. And I know that this is a serious investment, but also you're getting serious training for a serious investment. And like I said, I spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars. If this had been an option for me, I wouldn't have had to give up my career to pursue Atelier training. So it's, everything's a choice, but if you really want it, that's the value in it, is that you're going to get quality, high-end Atelier training from somebody who knows what they're doing. So just to review, here's all the things that you get in the bootcamp. So you get critiques 2 times a week that are very thorough. Like, you're going to bring your artwork, whatever you're doing, whatever stage you're at. And even if you don't have artwork, like, come to the critiques anyway and learn from your classmates, right? Because you can learn so much by understanding where other people kind of went awry or what other people are doing well, right? This boot camp is really a community of people that are all trying to do the same thing you're trying to do. We're all trying to learn together. So there's more than 15 extensive video lessons. And when I say extensive, I mean extensive. For those of you who have seen my bark plate course, the free one on YouTube, you know how thorough my instruction is. So it's, I showed you all the stages of a painting. Imagine if I spent an hour on each one of those slides. You're getting that level of in-depth knowledge and instruction. It includes a master copy bundle, because it turns out that some master copies are better from learning from if you're new to Atelier training than others. And instead of you picking like a really impossible master copy for your first one, here is a curated selection for you that will give you solid results. And also, of course, the studio setup, the art supply list with hot links, it's all in the boot camp. How to prep your palette the right way so that you're not fighting your palette. If you don't prep your palette the right way, it sucks all the oil out of your paint and makes the paint really difficult to work with, right? So everything is thought out for you. Every pitfall I've seen students make over the last decade is addressed to make sure that you are efficiently growing your Atelier skills. And I think the most important thing about this bootcamp is that it is a community. So this whole course is in an online course software program where it basically acts like your favorite social media platform. You can, be in a group chat with everybody that's in the course. You can individually chat with people that you got this critique from Mandy today. Can you tell me, what you were thinking or why you chose this or whatever. There's posts. So just like on a social media platform, like, you can post your artwork. Let's say you can't make it to the critique this week. You can take a picture of whatever you're stuck on or whatever your painting is at, post it, and get a critique from an Atelier trained artist, like right there in the chat feature in the feed. So you can communicate with your classmates. It really is a kind of an accountability for you too. So I've had lots of students that have written me through the years asking me for private instruction, but I have found that The ones that I've taken on as private students, often they struggle trying to do it alone and in isolation. And when I've done the group classes and they've had classmates to kind of feed off of and encourage each other and help each other, that it just created, such a strong community for learning that really helps students progress more quickly. Okay, so this is the boot camp. So if you want to learn Atelier painting and Atelier skills, I'm just going to throw up the link for you. So there's a whole bunch more information, when you go to this page. Oh, what did I do? Okay, so when you click on this page, it has pages and pages of information that you can read through. It's very thorough about the boot camp. It has some quotes from other students that have trained with me in the past talking about what they learned and what it meant to them to learn it. And if you choose to purchase the boot camp, you'll start by seeing this page that the link is there for you. It'll ask you to create an account. This is because this is done in a learning course and in a learning platform called Mighty Networks. So it'll ask you to create the account. And once you create the account, it'll give you the opportunity to purchase and enter the boot camp. So the boot camp is $4.99 a month, but it's done monthly. So you can, let's say you have the next 6 months to really dedicate to training, but then you have to go away for a few months. That's not a problem. So you can renew each month. You can end at any month. You can come back when you want to come back. So that being said, I am limiting the number of students in this boot camp because I'm not going to take on more students than I know that I can give quality instruction to. So the risk, of course, is if you leave, there might not be space for you when you come back because there is a lot of demand, for people for this training. But it's flexible. It's intended to be flexible for you. It's intended to be there for you when you're ready to take yourself seriously as an artist and to train seriously. Okay, so we got through this lesson quicker than I thought. The other ones I barely had enough time to finish and I rushed this time. But as promised, any questions that you have about painting or how to paint, I'm here for you and I'm here to answer these questions for you. So feel free to ask anything that's on your mind in the chat. It can be about Atelier training generally. If you have experienced a specific problem in your own painting and want some advice from me, tell me about it. I'd love to help you. We have some time to really address what's on your mind and to help you, move forward in your painting journey, whatever that means for you. Oh, I see Elena is asking, how do I come back between stages? I think she's talking about the stages of painting, right? Like you start with a drawing and then a wipeout. The advantage of the wipeout being dry before you start painting over it is that, let's say your painting goes really awry and you know it, you can actually wipe off the color part that you did and your dry underpainting underneath will still be there for you, right? Now, if you've done color work and it's dried and then you mess it up, then you can just create another wipeout. You already know how to do that.